get a little bit better of an angle. I think, let me just turn it just a little bit more. And I think that's good enough. Hello, everyone. Welcome back. We are, I guess it's like part 3, but it's really part 2 because we're working on sashing. In the first live or the first video, we made just these squares. So these have the stars in the center of them. So I did the construction of this to show you how to make them so that you would know how to make each of these. This is a pattern by Jordan Fabrics. It's called Shooting Stars. And there is the star that is in the center. It's not made like the traditional one where we would use a flying geese in there. This one, oh, it's thundering. This one is made with putting little, like if you will, a square and a square in each of the two corners of the square, and that makes the points for the stars. From there, on live earlier, I added sashing to either side of the block. So now for the entire row, we have sashing at the beginning, in between, and on the end. Each one has a, there are two different sets, I should say, or two different layouts. This one has the reds in the corners with the blue in the corners on the inside. Some of them have the blues on the corner on the outside with the red on the corners on the inside. So that was the switch for the two. What we are going to work on today are these. And these are rows that are going to go in between those rows that I just showed you. And this is the sashing, and then a square, 2.5-inch square, corner square, that's going to go on right here in this corner. So what will happen is once we make these rows, it'll help us to connect the two rows of blocks that we have. And it will give us this look. So we'll have sashing in between the two rows, the rows of rows, and then we will have the squares in the corners. So that's what we're looking to do. I am alternating red and blue, but I'm not worried about the fact that there will be a red and a blue red here this way, but blue blue that way. I'm not worried about, because there was no way, the way that I have this arranged, to alternate the color, and that's fine. So this is already 2 of the 5 rows that I have. I have 2 more rows, 3 more rows that I need to do. This was the reverse of this. So I ended each one with red on one side, with blue on the other side. So that means that now this end will get attached here. And then when we fold it over, it'll look like that. Okay. And I want to keep this right where it is so it doesn't mess up my thought pattern later. But I'll show you how we connect them in a little bit. But let's look at putting together the sashing to make those sashing rows. And I just need to check one thing. So I need 6 of these because there are 5 rows and I need a top and a bottom for each one. So that means that 3 will start with red and 3 will start with blue. So to get started with this, we already have everything cut out and ready to go. And I am going to chain piece these because there's no sense in doing these one by one by one. I did them one by one just to set up the sample so that I could show you what it looked like. But for the purpose of moving forward, it just makes sense to go ahead and chain piece these. So we're going to add on, and it's up to you, your order, your way. So you can alternate if you choose, or you could just do all the reds first and then all the blues. That's totally up to you. So it's a 1/4 inch seam. You can back stitch if you want. It's not the end of the world if you don't. And we're just going to lay these out. In my mind, even though these are petite, it seems like one end is a little lighter than the one side is a little lighter than the other. So you may see me flip them from time to time. Now I believe that I cut enough red and enough blue. There's going to be either a red or a blue on the outside of each of the sashings when they are in rows. But usually I add those at the end once I have all of the rows constructed. So I'm just lining these up and praying that I have enough strips, which I think I do. Was thinking about that earlier and I was like, did you cut enough of these? And I think I did. So I'm just lining everything up. This is small enough where I can line it up. I don't need to pin it, clip it, or anything like that. If you prefer to lay everything out and it just makes sense for you to pin or clip so that you know what you know and you're not guessing, you can absolutely pin and clip. I just don't want to pin and then clip and then take them out when I can just attach them and keep going. And again, I can do this either row by row, or I can do these by just, putting them all together and then going back and attaching the rows later. So it's totally up to you which way you choose to have this laid out. There's no wrong way, and I don't know that there's necessarily a better way because you're doing the same thing regardless. I'm just hoping that tomorrow doesn't bring showers in the morning, because one thing that I don't like is thunder. Thunder and lightning is the one thing for me. And it's been so hot lately that it makes sense that this is what it's doing. Okay, so we've done 2. I have 4 to go. Okay, they're all chain pieced together. So what I am going to do is take a blue one and a red one, and we're going to start sewing those together. Each of the sashing goes alongside the square that we made, the quilt block that we made, that has the and there's 3 of them. So that means that I need 3 sashes. So I only need 4 of these, and this is one. We'll cut that off just so that I know I started a new set. So again, there are 4 rows that I'm doing. And I'm attaching blue and red. That's 2. Trying to make sure I turned it in the right direction. It's inevitable that I may mess up one, because my mind will always play tricks on me. That's 3. Oh, got a lot of reds. And that's 4. Okay. So 1, 2, we'll cut off 1. These are my extras. I'll put these over here so I don't get them confused. Clip, clip. Okay. So this is what we have so far. I need another blue one on this side. So I have blue one here, and I can attach that here. And I'm going to tell you what I'm going to do so I don't have to think. Snip this off because this is going to start a new row. I'm just going to take the red and I'm going to clip it. Really, I could just sew it. And that'll finish off this row. Okay, so 1 row is done. So it's red, blue. We need a red. Oops, let me just get that under there. And then we're going to end it in a blue. So one end starts off with red, the other end starts off with blue. Okay, and we'll just line those up. Okay. So far that's 2 done. We only need 4 because we already finished 2. Now I have 2 more reds than I should have, but that's fine. We'll do this end. Make sure I turn that the right way. I was getting ready to turn that the wrong way. And then we'll finish this side off with blue. And we're just lining everything up. Okay. And here's the last one. Like I said, I made 1 more red, but not a problem. And then we'll finish that last one off again with a blue. One end is going to be red, one end is going to be blue. If it was an odd number, I would have to be a little bit more strategic. Because it's an even number, this will work. And somehow I counted extras of these, so I have 2.5-inch squares left for another project. And I have plenty of fabric left to do something with that as well. I have a couple good ideas. Okay. That's one. That's two, three, and four. So because I am not good with paying attention, we'll just make sure that everything is in the right direction before I take it to my machine. Because the way that I did it, by adding that last block on, sometimes I get them mixed up in reverse. So I just want to double check to make sure that I didn't do that. Because like I said, it's inevitable that I usually do. And I guess because I was paying attention, it didn't happen. Okay. For this, I am pressing these all the same way. So I am going to press my blocks in. So I'm going to press these squares out. So towards the white. Now you could do your rows one after the other, or you could do them in parts. It's up to you. That is totally up to you how you want to piece this together, the rows together. There are only 5 rows for this particular quilt, so it really doesn't matter. But if it were more than 5 rows, I might do like 2 or 3 rows together as a set, then do 2 or 3 more rows together, and then put those 2 sets together. Okay, so that's one. So I have 4, like I said, that I have to do because the other ones were already done. So it's just a matter of getting these done. As I've said in other videos, you make the choice as to whether you want to press your seams open or closed. That is, to me, sometimes a personal preference. I prefer sometimes to press them closed into one side when I want to do what's called nesting the seams. When I want to nest the seams, I press them to one side. That means the weight of the fabric is on one side of the seam and the other side of the seam doesn't have any weight. That way, when I put 2 seams together, there's weight on opposite sides, which will help me to lock them or nest them in. So I want to make sure that these squares are squaring. So I prefer to nest, but you can absolutely line up your seams. That's 3. And that's 4. Okay. So they're all pressed. Now we did take one and already attach it. So, and we didn't attach it all the way. Just wanted to make sure I knew which direction I was going to have it go in. So I take the first 2 seams. I'm going to line them up. And I think I press these in. I'll press these towards and press those away. Okay, so I should have pressed this way, but that's fine because I can turn it the way that I want it to go and still lock them in. Seams right next to each other. The weight is on this side of the seam over here, but it's on this side of the seam over here. And that's what's helping me to lock those into place. I'm going to go to the next seam. These are going in the right direction. I'm going to line those seams up. Use my fingers to kind of mush them into place so that they lock and they're not overlapping. And then clip or pin. And do the same thing here. So that they lock. And I'm going to keep doing the same thing throughout. I can, if I want to, place clips here. These are just at the seams. You don't have to. But remember, your seams are weak because we did do some trimming. We did do some subcutting. And so there is the possibility that if you pull just a little too hard, that those seams might come apart. So you do want to be careful when you're pulling on your fabric. I'm just taking my time. And the more I don't rush this process, the better my chances are that the seams will line up. There is no rush. And it may seem kind of slow, but when you have great seams, it's worth the time and the patience. Take those seams, line them up to help them lock in and nest, and clip. And again, if you choose to clip, it's just more clips, but you can clip all those seams. That way, when you take it to your machine, if there's just a little bit of pulling, you're not pulling your seams apart. You really shouldn't be pulling a lot, but sometimes when we're just trying to make things line up, we may tug it just a little. So we're going to line all that up. Okay, lights don't flicker on me. And we're just going to take our time again. I'm going to get to a pin or clip. I take it off, but I am holding that with my finger until I get right about underneath of the foot, just so that it doesn't help to separate, or it doesn't cause my seams to move apart and ruin all the effort that I made for clipping them together. Make sure my seams are flat. I'm not placing my finger underneath of the needle. It is sitting on the side of it. Let me just make sure that seam is flat underneath the foot, and it's not. It just helps to keep your seam from pushing back towards you, because it'll want to do that, and it will twist the seams. It's not the end of the world if you twist them, because you can cut them to get them to untwist. You just don't want them twisted if you don't have to. And you can leave them twisted. Nobody's going to see it on the inside of the quilt. But if you can help it, we're aiming towards doing it right, not having flaws that don't need to happen. So I've now attached two bindings of the sash bindings, I like to call them, and two of the rows, the foot square rows. Because everything is going to go from left to right, I can iron at the end. I'm going to check here to make sure everything lines up. If it's not perfect, it's not the end of the world. But I do want to check, because if it's off, I'd rather catch it now than to have to try to fix it later. So just want to look to see if everything looks the way it's supposed to. Okay. And then I can add another row. Red is on the outside, so I need a blue. And we attach this. Doing the same method as before, the row to the sashing. So if you go in this order, it's going to be every other. So after I attach this row, I attach a row of sashing, then a row of blocks, then a row of sashing, then a row of blocks, then a row of sashing. The sashing is going to end this because we are going to have a border, if you will, of sashing in squares. I'm just taking my time. And my goal is that I should, keyword should, be able to get either the majority, if not the whole quilt top done this evening. That's the goal. I have a little bit of thread left so in my bobbin, so I may have to change the bobbin out. I will, if I can help it, I'll run a bobbin out um, rather than starting a new one. I've been working on the same project. So basically it's been the same bobbin. So usually when I do a video, sometimes I'll switch it. Now I did not pin or clip those seams that were in the squares. So you notice that I'm just using my fingers to straighten it up. I'm not pulling anything, but I am using my finger to help guide it without getting it underneath the needle, because even with these nails on, that is not a pretty feeling. Okay. And again, you can see like I'm not yanking because I don't want to yank on my fabric. And I don't want to pull because I don't want waves if I can help it. And again, I can, like, I'll take this up on my big iron upstairs on my big ironing board. And I made it almost to the end. So I had like just this much more and I ran out of bobbin. So I lost bobbin chicken there. Now, oops, knocked my thread off in the process. And my question is, where is my bobbin case? This is what happens when you put too much stuff on your table. So I keep extra bobbins. I try hard not to keep a lot of different colors. Because I very rarely use them and I don't like to waste bobbins to have a bunch of colors. So I will have like my blacks, I'll have my grays. If there is something that I can use up the reds for, I'll use that up. It just depends on what I'm working on. But I try as hard as possible. Like I will get a bobbin together for a project I'm working on and I'll run the bobbins for that color. So if I'm making a red dress, I'll run the bobbins for the red dress. And then if I'm making a quilt that has red in it, I'm going to run that red bobbin out. Okay. I'm going to start back a little bit to overlap. Oh, we got a flood warning. So now all the phones and all the stuff is going off in the house. So that means the water's going to come down and come down quick. And I can hear that water. I can hear the rain outside. Okay. So you can see I went right over top of that. Um, just so that it'll lock that in and I won't have to worry about where it stopped and started, and you'll never see it on that side. Okay. So if I'm starting on this side, I see blue. So we know that when we do our next strip, we're starting with the red side. Line everything up, then we're going to clip. So we're just going to work the same process. For anyone that just came in, I am working on shooting stars. It is a free pattern from Jordan Fabrics, and I am making a patriotic quilt to give to a veteran. I have not made up my mind what veteran to give this to. Um, I may not give it right away, but I will have it if in the event that either I just decide to randomly give it to a veteran, or if, let's say, during an event, I say, you know what, I would like to honor this person that we're having an event for by giving them this quilt. Maybe, somebody that I know is having a party this summer and they're honoring somebody who's a vet, and it's not like I can't make more. But I have never made a quilt of valor. I have some blocks for it, but I've never made the quilt itself. I've never made a red, white, and blue quilt. I have plenty of blocks upstairs that are red and white and blue. I've made a red, white, and blue table one, but never a quilt. So during Memorial Day, I decided to add that to my bucket list of things to do. Now, this time my seams are laying down. They're underneath of the sashing. So that's why you see me adjusting. And that's because I didn't clip it. If I clipped it, I wouldn't have to adjust it. But I'm trying to make sure that the fabric from the seams isn't getting by this bed, getting pushed back towards me. Because that's what'll twist those seams. As I press them in one direction, and even if I press them open, they can still twist. I also want to make sure that I'm not pulling, because I don't want to pull the seam apart. Okay. So again, we can check just to make sure that everything is straight. Oh, that's right. Looks a little off. Check there. And like I said, if it's a little off, I'm not worried about it, but I'm worried about it if it's really off. Okay, so blue will be the next start for the sash. Red will be the next start for the block, the corner block. So I have one more row after this one. And I think I have two more sashings. 1, 2, 3. Looks like 3 after this. One at the top and one at the bottom. That's why. I questioned. I was like, wait a minute, how is that? But I know what it is. It's because I have one at the top and one at the bottom to finish this off. So I'm just running through this again. And again, you don't have to do each seam, but everywhere where I need a perfect corner is where I want those seams to nest. And that's where I want to clip. So you can add as many clips as you like. I'm not adding all those clips. So again, I am working on, for anyone who just came in, I'm working on Shooting Stars. It is a free pattern by Donna Jordan Fabrics. And we are working on what I'm calling the sashing row. We have already put together the block rows with the sashing in between. And so we are adding the sashing rows and connecting everything together. So that's what we're working on right now. So we already made the sashing rows earlier. And now we are connecting them all together to finish the quilt top. Now I do have one more piece to the quilt top, which is the border. So I will add the border later. But right now, I'm just working on getting that sashing done. Then I will add the border, and I will absolutely do a video on the border process, because even though the directions tell us to do the border one way, I'm going to have to adjust because I decided for my sashing to go with 2.5 inches rather than, I think the pattern called for 2. And I was like, I want a bigger border. So we're just taking out the clips as we go. I like clips because pins, I will forget. I'll roll over pins. You can't roll over a clip. And if you can, it wouldn't be pretty. And that would totally be on you because I don't know how you missed it. So this is a red, white, and blue quilt. It is not in honor of the 4th of July, even though that is coming up. It is not in, it was something that I thought about right around Memorial Day, and I was thinking about quilts. And I said, you know, you've never done a quilt of ours. And you've never done a red, white, and blue quilt. I've done red, white, and blue things, but I've never done a red, white, and blue quilt. So I wanted to make one, and I do want to honor, like I said, a veteran with the quilt. So this is not going to be a quilt that I am going to sell. It'll be a quilt that I'm going to gift. I am not pressing as I go because I'm working in rows, and I can take the whole thing upstairs on my big ironing board and press the heck out of it once I get it up there. So I'm not pressing them down. I typically do press as I go because to me it is important to do that. But if the seams are not crossing as I'm sewing, then I don't have to worry about doing that right away. And that is one of the things that I like about sewing in rows. If I sew in blocks, then I need to press. But for this, we're just sewing in rows, so I don't have to press. Now that means that you have a bigger project to press at the end. But like I said, I'm okay with that because I'll be on my big iron and ironing board, I should say, because I have a big iron sitting right there on the big ironing board, and it'll go rather quickly. When I'm sitting at the table, sometimes it can get a little bit overwhelming to press it at the table, so I prefer to do it at the big ironing board. I'll save myself some steps. Okay, and then we'll add that there. All of the blocks for this quilt are the same. They're just different colors, different prints. They're all red and white, and the only difference is that one block has blues in the corners and the other one has reds in the corners. That's the only difference. So we didn't make a bunch of different blocks. They're all the same block. It's just the layout is a little different. So we're adding the next border on, the next sashing border, or the next sashing row, I should say. Okay. And again, I'm taking my time. I don't need to rush when I get right to those seams. So hopefully I can get them to stay lined up and give me great corners. Now I will pop a couple stitches out and do it again if it doesn't line up sometimes, if it's really off. Sometimes your quilting will mask it and it won't make a difference. But if it's really off, I'm going back and fixing it. Okay. And we're down to the last section of this row. I have a lot of raveling right around the end. Sometimes it'll get caught right up in my foot. Sometimes it won't. Okay. So again, just do that little check. Saves yourself some aggravation to look as you go than to wait to the end. This is nothing worse than to have it all together and then have to go back in and rip. Okay. Red, blue, red, blue. Okay, so this is an end. So this top is actually going to be finished. This I had to turn around because it starts with the blue. And this one starts with red. So I can add another border. I keep calling them borders. I'm going to add another row of sashing. And make sure that this is blue on this side. So I do want this to be red. Now, to be honest with you, you could eyeball and do this without even using one clip. But I do prefer sometimes to do it the right way. So I'm working on my second to last row of sashing. And I have one more row of blocks to add. And then I'll be done. And this will just, again, will only be the quilt top without the border. There is a border. And so somebody still needs to cut that border out. And then after she cuts the border out, she can add the border. And then we'll step back, think about the thread that I have. I think I have red, white, and blue thread. If I do, I think I will obsess with that because when would I use it for something else? So I may use that for this. Okay, so again, we're going through. Now, I did not clip those seams underneath. So my finger is kind of holding them just to make sure that as I'm holding this fabric straight, I'm not pulling the seams apart. It'll create holes or gaps. And even though I can tighten those up with quilting, I don't want to do that. I would hand sew them together if I wasn't quilting, if that happens, because I don't want to trust that the long armor may or may not see it. Especially if they're using like a computerized long arm, then they're not looking for it. They might inspect it, right? But they might not catch the hole because they're using computerized. Whereas if they're doing it by hand, then they may be paying a little bit more attention because they're drawing out the design. So when I expect that, I would be looking for holes. And I would do some stitches just to make sure that those gaps go away. Because I don't want them to quilt it, miss that little gap, and then I'm looking at batting. And I might just applique a piece over top of it or something just to make it go away. I'll figure it out, but I just don't want to do that. Okay. Okay. So again, just look at those there to see. And again, if there's a problem that is so far off that I don't like it, I will go back in and do a little seam ripping. But so far so good. And again, that comes from taking your time. Okay, and the last one starts off with the red. So I know that's the one I want. And so I'm attaching my last row with quilt blocks. And then remember, I have one more row of sashing. And that will be kind of like what would be called the inner border. Again, this is the Shooting Stars quilt. It is a pattern created by Donna Jordan of Jordan Fabrics. I am making this, the pattern itself was in red, white, and blue, but it was like a Let It Snow theme. It was still red, white, and blue. And I found this great batik fabric from Fat Quarter Shop. And I was like, yep, we're going to use that and create a quilt with it. And I actually have some more red, white, and blue, but I may save that for another time. Because Veterans Day is coming up, and I may choose to make another one during that time. I may have two to present during Veterans Day if I decide to wait until that time. I may post it and see who has a suggestion for a vet local to the area, because there are tons of veterans here. We have the VA hospital here. So I don't have to ship it out somewhere. Again, there are some seams that I back stitched over, others that I didn't. So I don't want to pull this and cause those seams to come apart. So I'm holding the fabric, but I'm not pulling it. When I get to the seams, I am using my pointer finger to just kind of hold them together so that I get those great points. It also helps the fabric, the seams not to push back. Like this seam is going in this direction. When it goes under the foot, sometimes it'll push it back like that, and it'll cause this to twist. And I don't want that. So by holding it, slowing down, getting right underneath their foot. If I have to lift the foot up, I can lift it up, and it'll help to keep that straight. This one is already going in this direction, so it's naturally going to push it in that direction, and I don't have to worry about it. Okay. Sometimes this little wall will get caught with thread or with my, what do you call it? Fraying threads, fraying strings. And so I do have to be mindful of that and just try to clear it. It'll snag, it'll come loose, but it's just a pain. And again, go underneath, and I slow down, but you need to make sure you're paying attention because you could gun your foot by accident. So you really don't want your finger. Now, the good thing is there's like a little guard here, so my finger can only go but so far. But I don't want to chance it. That's not something I want to dare the machine. Like, can it really do it? Okay. So then that's done. And we only have one row of sashing left to go. And then this will border all of the squares. And then the only thing, like I said, that I have left to do is the outer border. It's going to be a solid blue. And I am going to do a separate video for that. So again, we are taking both of the seams. We're lining them up side by side. And we're kind of nudging them together so that they do what's called nesting. And that's what's helping us to get those perfect corners, or close to perfect. And this is not a long process to do this, but it is great to take your time, line everything up, clip. And this is only 3 squares across. So with 3 squares across and sashing, it's going to be, of course, a lot narrower than it is long, but it's a lap size quilt. Okay. So everything is connected, and we can go back to our machine. And we can do this last one. If I can remember, I do a back stitch. That helps to keep everything in place, especially when I add that border. Make sure the seams are flat. When the sashing is up top, yeah, just that, just a little bit. That looks a little funky. Now, I didn't care about it for all the other ones, but okay. Okay. When you start to get, the quilt starts to get big, sometimes it'll fall off your table, and that'll pull, which will create some problems. So you do want to make sure that your quilt isn't falling off. Okay. Again, for anyone who's just come in, again, this is the Shooting Stars quilt. It's a free pattern by Donna Jordan, Jordan Fabrics. It's called Shooting Stars. The blocks themselves were very easy to put together. Okay. I'm used to doing sashing, so sashing is usually not that difficult. I will say that usually when I do sashing, I don't do the squares. So this is something a little different, not new, but different for me because usually I don't do those squares. Okay. Itching for some reason. Okay. So now everything is together. We'll go back in and we'll press and inspect in places like this that have little frays popping through. We'll carefully snip those. And I actually, next to my iron upstairs, the big iron, I have a pair of snips so that I can catch some of these. So I will go through and I will get them. I try not to pull them too much, but we'll go through, we'll pull all of those. We'll inspect to see if everything lines up the way that it should. And if it lines up the way that it should throughout, then that should be fine. And again, if it's a little off, I'm not worried about it. If it's a lot off, I'm concerned. But you'll see different places where the little frayings will pop through and we'll just, you know, cut those. Okay, but the whole thing is bordered with this, and then the corners have these, so that's all done. But the entire quilt now is finished for just the inside, and we still need to add the border. So I will come back once I have cut the border out. We'll cut the strips out, and then what I'll do is I'll come back to show how to measure for a border if you need to measure for it. Thank you. If I need to measure for a border, I'll come back and show you what that looks like to measure for the border. Because there's a little bit of math involved if you need it. And if not, you just go with the tried and true. Doesn't always work, so we do need to check it just to make sure. And then if that's the case, we can just go with what the pattern says. But like I said, I did make mine just a little bit bigger, so I'm going to have to measure it. But thank you everyone for joining me. Thank you for joining me here. I'll be on TikTok on Tuesday, but that's that whole other quilt that I'll be working on. So I'm finishing this one over here. So thank you. Thank you for joining me, CRT Vibes. I appreciate you. So thank you again, everyone. Have a good one. And like I said, I will go through how to add that border and some tips and tricks with that. So stay tuned.